Okay, so you want to own a Formula One team. 10 cars a season, global television audiences, sponsor logos on every surface of the car, and a business that just sold a minority stake for over $4 billion.
It's the fastest growing franchise model in sports. And unlike almost every other team sport on earth, you don't just own a fan base, you own an engineering company building some of the most advanced machines in the world.
That is the dream, and it is not entirely wrong. Here's what it doesn't tell you. For the first decade of this century, F1 teams weren't billion-dollar franchises. They were cash-burning machines that killed off entire grids of hopeful new entrants. And the only reason ownership works today is because the sport rewrote its own rules to stop teams from spending themselves to death. Let's start with what it costs just to get on the grid. Before you build a single car, the FIA requires a non-refundable $20,000 administration fee just to open an expression of interest. Once approved, new entrants pay a $200 million entry bond, guaranteeing 5 seasons of participation, an anti-dilution fee to compensate existing teams for splitting the prize pool, and an entry fee based on prior championship points, which for the reigning Constructors' Champion runs a base fee of roughly $680,000, plus over $8,000 per point scored the previous year. Then there's simply building the operation itself. A factory, a wind tunnel, design software, manufacturing equipment, and the hundreds of specialized staff needed to run it, which one industry source estimated can run as high as $400 million before a car ever turns a wheel. Gene Haas's team, which leaned heavily on outside partnerships to keep costs down, still spent an estimated $150 to $200 million just on initial setup. Once you're racing, here's the number that used to be the entire story of this sport: how much you're allowed to spend. Since 2021, the FIA has enforced a hard cost cap on car-related spending, set at $135 million for 2025, rising to $215 million in 2026 as more costs get folded into the cap itself. That figure covers chassis design, manufacturing, and the salaries of up to 100 core personnel. But it deliberately excludes driver salaries, marketing, the 3 highest paid executives, and legal and travel costs, meaning total organizational spending for a top team can still run well past $400 million a year once everything outside the cap is included. Before the cap existed, that number had nowhere near a ceiling. Some of the wealthiest teams were reportedly spending upward of $400 million a year on car development alone, while the smallest teams on the grid were trying to survive on a fraction of that, racing the exact same regulations with a fraction of the budget. Here's the trap that used to define this business before the cap arrived, and it's the reason half the grid has changed identity multiple times in the last 15 years. Formula One doesn't pay every team equally. Prize money is distributed based on Constructors' Championship position, meaning the better you finish, the more money you receive, which means teams already struggling for cash receive the least revenue, precisely when they need it most. Before the cost cap, this created a vicious cycle. An under-resourced team couldn't develop a competitive car. A slow car finished near the back. A back-of-grid finish meant minimal prize money, and minimal prize money meant no budget to develop a competitive car the following year, repeating indefinitely until the money simply ran out. Once a team is financially sound, the revenue model is genuinely one of the best in global sports. The core layer is the FIA prize money itself, distributed from Formula One's commercial rights holder based on championship standing, with the reigning champion earning significantly more than the back-of-grid finishers. Layered on top is sponsorship, title partners, livery space, and technical partnerships that can be worth tens of millions annually for a well-performing team. Then there's manufacturer backing, where teams owned or supported by car manufacturers like Ferrari or Mercedes gain access to engine technology, engineering resources, and brand value that independent teams have to buy or build from scratch. And increasingly, there's the franchise value itself. After a 2025 stake sale, McLaren was valued at $4.1 billion, a figure that would have been almost unthinkable in the pre-cost cap era, when several teams on the same grid were losing money every single season and still couldn't find buyers. Now, the disaster case study. And it's really 3 teams collapsing in the same 18-month window, which tells you the problem was structural, not personal. Marussia, Caterham, and HRT all entered Formula One together in 2010 as part of a deliberate FIA push to expand the grid with new, independently funded teams. None of the 3 ever escaped the back of the field. HRT collapsed first. Then, in October 2014, both Caterham and Marussia entered administration within days of each other, missing the United States Grand Prix, the first time in the sport's history a team had failed to show up for a race weekend due to money. Caterham, in a moment that became genuinely historic, resorted to public crowdfunding just to afford to compete in its final race. Marussia's main financial backer withdrew entirely, and despite being provisionally included on the 2015 entry list, no buyer emerged willing to cover the entrance fee before the deadline passed, and administrators laid off nearly 200 staff as the team ceased trading for good. Caterham's remaining assets were sold at auction the following spring. A rescued version of Marussia limped on as Manor Racing for 2 more seasons, briefly scoring a shock points finish in 2016 before running out of money again and folding permanently that same year. All 3 teams had genuine engineering talent, genuine racing pedigree, and genuine grid slots in the most prestigious motorsport series in the world. None of it mattered, because the sport's revenue distribution model paid them the least exactly when their thin budgets needed the most, and there was no ceiling stopping wealthier rivals from simply outspending them into irrelevance every single season. Let's run the numbers on 2 scenarios, both post-cost cap, since that single rule change is what separates the 2 eras of this business. Optimistic case, you enter as a well-funded midfield team, spend at or near the $135 million cap on car development, secure strong sponsorship worth $60 million annually, and finish consistently in the top half of the Constructors' Championship, earning solid FIA prize money on top. Total annual revenue lands around $220 to $250 million against total organizational costs, including everything outside the cap, of roughly $200 million, leaving a genuine operating profit and a franchise whose resale value climbs every season the sport's broader popularity grows. Precisely the trajectory that took McLaren from financial uncertainty to a $4.1 billion valuation. Realistic case, you enter with adequate but not exceptional funding. Spend near the cap, just like everyone else, since the rules now force spending parity. But your car simply isn't competitive enough to finish above the bottom third of the grid. Sponsorship dollars, which flow disproportionately to visible, winning teams, come in well below projection. Prize money, tied directly to finishing position, lands at the lower end of the distribution table. Even with the cost cap preventing you from being technically outspent the way Marussia and Caterham once were, thin sponsorship and thin prize money can still leave a smaller team running close to break even for years. One bad ownership decision or one lost major sponsor away from the kind of cash crisis that used to be the norm for the entire back of the grid. So if you decide to own a Formula One team, understand what you're actually buying. You're not just buying an engineering company or a piece of a global entertainment product. You're buying a spot in a competition where, even under a cost cap designed specifically to prevent it, finishing position still determines how much money flows back to you the following year. Get competitive quickly. In the era of billion-dollar valuations, and this can be one of the most valuable franchises in modern sports. Fall to the back of the grid the way 3 teams did within 18 months of each other, and even F1's rulebook can't fully protect you from the same downward spiral that has already ended more teams than it's created.